All right. It says I'm live. Looks like I am. It's about 9:41 on a Friday night. So Shabbat Shalom, happy Sabbath to everyone. And even if you're not keeping the Sabbath, I still hope you have a good day because it's still a good day to be alive. And um, I just hope that somehow, some way, this holy day that Yahweh has set apart from creation will be a benefit to you because it was made for man. Anyway, to get started, if you saw my Facebook post leading into this, I suggested and asked that you please, if you're going to tune into this or watch it later, have a Bible ready. Definitely want to have an open mind ready. Anyone who knows me any length of time knows that I look at the Bible with a very open mind. I decided a long time ago that if, especially in regards to prophecy, if we're going to have any shot at avoiding the deception that's coming, we have to be open minded. We have to look at every possible angle we can look at. It's like if you're playing chess with somebody and you anticipate maybe one or two moves that they're going to do, and you get locked in on trying to negate those moves. Well, there's, 1,000 other moves that they could possibly make. And if you don't see those coming, then it's checkmate before you know it. So when we're dealing with an adversary, Satan, who is vastly more intelligent than we are, we owe it to ourselves to really try to think outside the box, try to think of every possible scenario that could come our way. And we know that ultimately, most of the options are not going to pan out. But I just feel wholeheartedly that if we're locked in on what we're told from the seminaries, from the Bible prophecy teachers, from the Hal Lindsays, from the Jonathan Kahns, whoever, we're going to get messed up quick when this goes down. So this is just my effort to add some another angle to this, and could be right, could be wrong, could be both. We'll see. This is just, I when I first started to look beyond the conventional stuff that I had been taught growing up. I was raised in mainstream Christianity. I'm Torah observant now, believer in Messiah, and what led me down this road was it goes back to prophecy for me because the church I was growing up in was a preterist church, and we were taught that every single thing that was ever prophesied had already happened effective 70 AD when Jerusalem was destroyed. That's what I was taught. That's what I believed. And as part of my little foray into the New Age in my late teens, early 20s, I was researching some type of paranormal phenomenon. And I don't know how it happened, but on the search engine, a page came up for the Beast of Revelation and Daniel. And so I clicked on it and I read through it, and it blew my mind because it's talking about, end times context of these prophecies, nations. It's talking about like the Antichrist and all this stuff that was completely foreign to me. I had never, because, if you believe all that stuff's already been, it's already happened, why do you need to study it? There's no need, when they would go into the book of Daniel in church, it would be like, the fiery furnace, the lion's den, pretty much that's it. The stories, in quotes, they wouldn't get into the prophetic chapters. Revelation, it would be looking at the letters to the churches, and that's pretty much about it. Generally, because that's where you're. It's got good fodder for daily living. Motivational kind of stuff there. He who overcomes. Well, we all want to overcome. So let's read those letters to the assemblies and see what needs to happen for that to happen. But they wouldn't touch any of the prophetic stuff, the trumpets, the bowls, any of that stuff, because what's the point? It's already happened, right? I obviously don't believe that anymore. There's basically that, which is preterism, and this is just kind of just a brief recap of different beliefs to kind of set this up. There's historicism, which basically teaches that once the prophecy was made, it began to be fulfilled, and it continues to be fulfilled. It's just a continuous unfolding. I know Seventh-day Adventists typically believe that. A lot of the Protestants did. John Calvin, Martin Luther, that time frame. Proponents of that typically believe that the Roman Church, specifically the papacy, has been the beast ever since its inception, and it's continued to function in that office in some capacity. And then futurism is the prevailing view now, basically that all of the prophecies, that are pertaining to anything remotely near the end are still coming. I took a hard turn from preterism right into full futurism, skipped over historicism. Um, you know, After studying this for 15 or so years now, pretty heavy, I'm kind of in the middle of all that. I can see validity for all those. I don't think we can throw any of them out. It's each prophecy has to be looked at in its own context. Some of them have been fulfilled. Some of them have been in the process of being fulfilled, and some of them are still coming. So to just embrace one of those three paradigms when you look at your eschatology and throw out the other ones is setting yourself up for a fall. I think we have to be open minded for the whole thing. Any possibility, like I said. Um, so I'm going to throw out some possibilities here. Some of the stuff I'm going to present is I can almost guarantee you've never heard before, just because I I have no filters anymore when I think of prophecy. Every possible concept is on the table. Everything is fair game. I don't rule anything out. Okay, so because I took all those filters off, I'm able to look at everything like how I consider 3D. I connect dots that people don't normally connect. Doesn't make me smarter than anybody else. It just, I don't know, makes me just more open, I guess. So I'm going to look at some of that tonight. I'm not going to go through the whole book because that would take a good long time, and it's going to be a lengthy study as it is. I'm going to focus on Revelation 10 through 13. And I don't know if anybody has read my posts on this, but you can go online and Google it or YouTube. I think there's a really nice Facebook video that talks about how Revelation has a chiastic structure. Okay, for those of you who don't know what that is, a chiasm is a literary device where you basically write your narrative left to right and then right to left, and it mirrors in the middle. Okay, so like if you know your rhyming schemes in poetry, you might have like an A, B, B, A. Okay, you might have an A, B, C, B, A. Okay, that type of concept. Okay, with chiasm, the idea is that it's to bring focus to the middle. It's a pyramidal type concept. Okay, so like Revelation has 22 chapters. So around the middle of the book is right in this section that I'm talking about tonight. So this is kind of where it's kind of focusing its attention on, if you look at it chiastically. Okay, and with the trumpets, the bowls, all that stuff, I don't have any really different understanding than anybody else does on that. I kind of made up my mind on that stuff a while ago that we'll know it when we see it. so I gave up trying to that was all going to look like, at least for now. But I think when we get into like 10 through 13, I think there's a little bit more to work with, and I'm going to put some ideas out there for your consideration tonight. Please don't shoot them down just right away, just because they're different. Please give it some thought, give it some prayer. If I'm wrong, so what? But if I end up being right in any way, then this is important information that the body of Messiah needs to consider. Okay, so to get started, I'm just going to read. I'm not going to read the whole section as I go through, but I'm just going to kind of skim through, and then I'm going to kind of comment and kind of give my thoughts on different things as we go through. But starting in Revelation 10, I saw another strong angel coming down out of heaven, clothed with a cloud, and the rainbow was upon his head. And his face was like the sun, and his feet like pillars of fire. And he had in his hand a little book. This would actually be a scroll, I believe. In the Greek, it's more literally a scroll, which was open. Keep that in mind. This scroll is open, all right? Keep that in mind. He placed his right foot on the sea and his left on the land, and he cried out with a loud voice as when a lion roars. And when he had cried out, the seven peals of thunder uttered their voices. When the seven peals of thunder had spoken, I was about to write, and I heard a voice from heaven saying, seal up the things which the seven peals of thunder have spoken, and do not write them. Okay? So here's the first question. Okay, John is in this vision. He's in Patmos. He's in a vision where he's in heaven. Okay, he's been given. He's showing what's going to happen on the day of Yahweh. You know, at the beginning of the book, when it says that he was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, that's not Sunday, people. If you look at all the apocalyptic prophetic literature in throughout the Bible and let the terms define themselves, okay, let's think logically. The Lord's day, Lord apostrophe S, that means belonging to, right? The day belonging to the Lord. We could also say the day of the Lord, exact same meaning, okay? He's in the Spirit on the day of the Lord. He's in the Spirit, and he's in that time frame. You know, it's like we see it in sci-fi movies all the time, where you go to another dimension, you go to another universe, you jump forward in the future, a time machine, whatever. You're there in that new spot, in that new reality, observing what's there. You're not where you started. Okay, so he is in the Spirit, and he's looking, and he's seeing what's going to happen on the day of Yahweh, on the day of the Lord. Okay, it's not a Sunday. Now, I guess it could have been a Sunday, but there's nothing in the text that plainly says it was the first day of the week. Okay, so I just want to clarify that. So my question is, okay, this angel utters his voice, and we hear these peals of thunder, the seven thunders. Okay, John is allowed to hear that, but he's told not to write it down. My question is why? He was told to write down everything he saw and heard here while he's in this revelation, in this vision. He's allowed to hear this thunder. He's allowed to hear these seven thunders, but he's told specifically not to write them down. Okay? It says, seal up the things which the seven peals of thunder have spoken, and do not write them. That's why we don't know what it says. You're not going to find any record here in Revelation of what those thunders said. Okay? So why would he be allowed to hear those thunders if there wasn't a purpose? Why let him hear that? You know, he's going to take that to his grave. You know, I mean, theoretically, he's going to take that to his grave, and nobody's going to have any clue. So why even let it happen? You know, why show him and let him hear what these thunders are going to say? Okay, so keep that question in mind, and we're going to keep reading. Then the angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on land lifted up his right hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and the things in it, and the earth and the things in it, and the sea and the things in it, that there will be delay no longer. But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he is about to sound, then the mystery of Elohim is finished, as he preached to his servants, the prophets. Okay, so we're talking about the mystery of Elohim is stuff that was preached to the prophets. Okay, so if you want to know what the mystery of Elohim is, go read your prophets. Go read Daniel, obviously. Go read, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Habakkuk. I mean, read them all. Hosea, Amos, Zechariah, Zephaniah, Haggai, all of them. Read them all, okay? Because if you limit yourself to the New Testament for your understanding of eschatology and what's coming, you're missing a whole lot of context. Get into the prophets, people. I can't tell you that enough. I cannot stress that enough. These men died, and a lot of them gave prophecies that were for the end. They weren't even for people who were living in their generation. Okay? Don't make their deaths be in vain. Please heed their words, read their words, and take them to heart. I can't stress it enough. Verse 8, then the voice which I heard from heaven, I heard again speaking with me and saying, go, take the book or the scroll which is open in the hand of the angel who stands on the sea and on the land. So I went to the angel, telling him to give me the little book. And he said to me, take it and eat it. It will make your stomach bitter, but in your mouth it will be sweet as honey. I took the little book out of the angel's hand and ate it. And in my mouth it was sweet as honey. And when I had eaten it, my stomach was made bitter. And they said to me, you must prophesy again concerning many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. Okay? So the eating of the scroll, this is something that we see other prophets do. Isaiah, I think, did it. I think Ezekiel did it. Jeremiah might have done it. I don't know. Sometimes you'll see them eating a scroll, which is symbolic of, ingesting the words, internalizing the words so that they can have it for later. Sometimes you'll see an angel or Yahshua himself as the angel of Yahweh touching their lips with a burning coal that puts the words there. That's the same type thing we're looking at here with eating the scroll. But this is key, okay? Now, this is verse 11. You must prophesy again concerning many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. Okay? So question. John is on the island of Patmos here. Okay? Now, there are accounts that before he got here, the Romans had been trying to kill him. There were reports that he had been boiled alive in oil, didn't faze him. They couldn't kill the guy. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but so he's in exile here on the island of Patmos. They don't know what to do with him. Okay? So when did he prophesy after this vision, after he was given his vision on Patmos? When did he go and prophesy again concerning many peoples, nations, and tongues and kings? We have no record of that happening. That's possible. Maybe he was let out of Patmos, and maybe he went on the road again. Maybe he prophesied. We have no record of it. Okay, so we have a reasonable expectation that it did not happen. For all we know, he died on Patmos. We just don't know. Okay, so people wonder who the two witnesses are. Okay, we're going to get into that. Okay, the conventional theories that are out there is some combination of Moses and Elijah, or maybe Enoch. Okay, Moses and Elijah were there with Yahshua at the Mount of Transfiguration. Elijah was taken into heaven, supposedly. We don't know. There's no record of his actual death. Enoch, it says specifically, was taken into heaven. So those are candidates. There are lots of other candidates. You make it more spiritualized, and you can say, well, it's the two houses of Israel, Israel and Judah. It's the Old and the New Testament. There's all different, anything that you compare down to the number two, people will put out there as a theory on who the two witnesses are. Okay. I'm going to speculate, and I'm not telling you this is going to happen, but I think we do need to be ready for it just in case. John of Patmos could be one of these two witnesses. And I base that on what I just read. Okay? Because if he was there to hear those thunders, okay, but he was told not to write them down, there has to be a purpose for that. There has to be. Okay? So I'm wondering if that purpose is so that he can tell us himself what those thunders said at the right time. Wouldn't that be epic? That would be awesome. Okay. It makes sense to me, because why else would he allow John to hear those things, but tell him not to write them down and seal them up? Okay. So if he didn't write it down, we have no record of it. The best case scenario, we would have an oral tradition of it where he told a disciple or something and they pass it down orally. But either way, nobody alive now that I know of has any clue what these thunders say. Okay, so if we're going to know, it's going to have to be John that tells us somehow, just logically, because he's the only one that heard it. Okay, so we need to be open to the possibility that he might be one of these two witnesses. Okay, that are coming up, and I'm not going to read all through 11. What I am going to do though is I'm going to go and to the end of the book of John, and in order to make this connection, we have to assume that the John who wrote the Revelation on Patmos is also the Apostle John. That's the general consensus among most people. I know that scholars have debates, that they might be two different Johns. The writer of the epistles of John, First John, Second John, Third John, maybe that's a different John. Most people just accept that it's all the Apostle John, but we really don't know 100% for sure. Okay, but assuming that it is the same John, assuming that it is the Apostle John who wrote the Revelation, let's take a look at the last chapter of the Gospel of John, okay? I'm going to okay. I'm going to start reading in chapter 21, verse 12 for context. Yahshua said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples ventured to question him, "Who are you?" knowing that it was the Master. Yahshua came and took the bread and gave it to them, and the fish likewise. This is now the third time that Yahshua was manifested to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. So when they had finished breakfast, Yahshua said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Master, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my lambs." He said to him again a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Master, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Shepherd my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he had said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Master, you know all things. You know that I love you." Yahshua said to him, "Tend my sheep." Okay, let's back up a little bit. I'm going to throw a second possibility in for a witness that you probably never thought of. Okay, because this one's way off the map. This one's way out of the box. And this is a lot more tenuous, I'll admit. But again, it's something that's plausible. Okay. So notice back in verse 15, Yahshua says, "Simon, son of John." Okay. Now, let's go back to when Simon Peter was called. And I didn't plan to get into this tonight, so I didn't have my scriptures ready, but I will find it real quick. Okay. It's not in Matthew. Is it in Mark? Bear with me just a moment. I'll have this figured out here in a minute. I don't see it in Mark. Maybe I do. Nope, not Mark. Let's check Luke. This is important, so bear with me here. Why am I not finding that? Yeah, I'm not finding it offhand, so forgive me for that. But I can guarantee that in one of the other Gospels, it refers to Simon as the son of Jonah. Okay. Now in the English, you're thinking, well, John, Jonah, they're pretty close. In the Greek and in the Hebrew, they're not. They're completely different names. Okay, they're totally different. It's not just a misspelling or a phonetical thing. It's completely different. Okay, so also when you look in the Greek, son, Simon, son of John, is missing. Okay, the son is not there. So if you were to read it literally in the Greek, translated in English, it would just be, "Simon, John, do you love me more than these?" Okay, there's no son there. That's interesting, okay, because if we go down, we're going to keep reading, starting in verse 18. "Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were younger, you used to gird yourself and walk wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will gird you and bring you where you do not wish to go." Now this he said, signifying by what kind of death he would glorify Elohim. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, "Follow me." Okay. Now there are stories, ancient stories going back to the apostolic age, early church fathers, whatnot, that talk about Peter, going to Rome being crucified upside down and all this kind of stuff. And they say, well, this is what he's talking about here. Okay. If you factor that out and don't, I mean, if you just, if you gave this scripture to someone who had no concept of Christianity, who had no concept of crucifixions or crosses or any of that stuff, and just had them read this, this is just an old man. This is just a blind old man just being led around, going places that he doesn't want to go. That's all this is. There's nothing in this text that has anything to do in and of itself with crucifixion. Okay, we're reading that into it. Whoever wrote that back in the day, even if it is true, even if Peter was crucified upside down in Rome, there's nothing connecting this verse to that. Okay, there's just nothing there. I mean, we know what crucifixion looks like. Okay, you'll be led around, bring you where you do not wish to go. You'll stretch out your hands, someone else will close you. This is a blind old person who's having to be led around. Anyway. Verse 20, Peter turning around saw the disciple whom Yahshua loved. We're assuming that this is John. Now, I know that there's another theory that this is actually Lazarus. I'm not going to go there on this one. I'm going to assume that it's John, just because, like I said earlier, if this is, for this connection to work, this has to be the same John who wrote Patmos, who wrote from Patmos, okay? This theory doesn't work if this is a different John or if it was Lazarus, okay? Peter turning around saw the disciple whom Yahshua loved following them, the one who was also leaned back on his bosom at the supper, and said, Master, who is the one who betrays you? So Peter, seeing him, said to Yahshua, Master, and what about this man? Yahshua said to him, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. Okay, so if I want him to remain until I come, what's that to you? When is Yahshua coming? At the end of the age? So if I want him to remain until the end of the age, what's that to you, Peter? Think about that. Think about that. Because Yahshua died roughly around 30. Okay, Jesus, whatever. He died around 30. He's not coming back until the end of the age. It's been 2,000 years, give or take, and he still hasn't come. Let that sink in, okay? Therefore, this saying went out among the brethren that the disciple would not die. Yet Yahshua did not say to him that he would not die, but only, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? Okay, so John is clearly going to die, or whoever this person is clearly going to die. But Yahshua is holding it out there that he might wait. He might extend his life until he returns and then allow him to die. Now, that sounds crazy. I know. It sounds way out there, but I told you right off the bat, this was going to be outside the box. This is outside the safe zone. This is doctrinal. I don't know what. Okay. So this is just, but we have to consider these kinds of things because we don't want to be caught off guard when we get locked in to looking for specifics and then we miss the boat on what actually happens. Okay. So I'm putting this out there as possibilities. I'm not telling you that this is 100% fact. I'm not telling you, you should believe this. I'm putting this out there strictly as a possibility. Okay, so keep that in mind because I know it is crazy. I know it does sound wacky. I'm well aware. Okay. Anyway, this is the disciple who is testifying to these things and wrote these things, and we know that this testimony is true. And there are also many other things which Yahshua did that if they were written in detail, I suppose that even the world itself would not contain the books that would be written. So I'm theorizing if John of Patmos is the beloved disciple here, okay, Yahshua is allowing him to live somewhere on the planet until his coming. And prior to his coming, he is going to come into action as one of the two witnesses. And at that point, he's going to tell us what those thunders said. We're going to find out what those thunders said because he didn't write it down for us to read later like he did the rest of the Revelation. Okay, it's the only thing that makes logical sense to me as far as why Yahshua would allow him to hear those thunders, but tell him not to write them down. If he otherwise, just there's no point in even going through it. Why let him hear it? You know, he's telling him things for our sake. You know, it just doesn't make any sense otherwise to me. Now, Peter, that's a big reach. I get it. Okay, but if you look at the fact that he does not say Simon, son of Jonah, like he called him earlier in the Gospels, he's saying Simon John. He's not even saying son of John or Simon, son of John. He's just saying Simon John in the literal. Okay, so we could be, that could give us cause to look at, these two together. So I think there is a remote possibility that in addition to John, we could be looking at Peter being one of the second witnesses. Okay. Now, this is significant to me because if there's any truth to this, imagine if John and Peter, two disciples of Yahshua that broke bread with him, that washed his feet, that, or he washed their feet, that were there throughout his ministry, saw miracles, were explained the parables, understood everything, because it's been 2,000 years since this happened, guys. We can't realistically expect that we have every single fact pinned down 100% accurately from that time. There has been corruption. We play that telephone game, where you say, Bob had a wooden cat, and the next person says Bob had a wooden rat, and the next thing you know, Tom had a wooden bat, and on down the line. We can easily see that illustrated in our schools, but for whatever reason, when it comes to the Bible, the word of Yahweh, we can't process that. We just had it 100% correct from day one. Nobody's ever gotten off course, but yet we've got how many thousands of denominations, right? Okay. I posted a link to a Wikipedia article on justification. Umpteen different interpretations of justification. Why? If we had the 100% undoctored, uncorrupted, unadulterated truth right from the Messiah's mouth, that would not be the case. It has been corrupted. It has been misunderstood. It has been transferred incorrectly on down the telephone line. Okay. But if these two men were to come, and if they were, who better to tell us what he actually said and set us straight? These guys could do it. They could tell us, they could explain, they could get us on the right track for the ones who are willing to listen. And okay, because we know as we read through Revelation 11, these guys are not going to be popular. Okay. So if these guys are alive right now, I have no clue where they're at. For all we know, John is still in a cave on Patmos somewhere, if he's alive, if there's any truth to this. Peter, in one of his letters, talks about writing from Babylon, and I know a lot of people will say that, well, that's code for Rome. Well, obviously he was crucified in Rome. Well, we don't know that for sure. Okay. So, and you could make the case that he was never in Rome, because some of the stuff that when you look at Paul, and you just start to look logically at some of the dates and some of the locations and stuff. I don't have all the details here in front of me because I didn't mean to go this way. I'm not prepared for this. But if you just go online and look, was Peter crucified in Rome? You'll see some scholarly reports where they compare Peter to Paul, and they make the point that if Peter had died in Rome at the time he was said to have, he would have encountered Paul a lot more, and Paul would have made more mention of him in his writings, basically, and vice versa. Okay, they do mention each other, obviously, but they would have bumped into each other a lot more. And it doesn't seem like from the text that they really, Paul met him once or twice. Peter was familiar with Paul's writings and the controversy they generated. This seems to be about it. Okay, now when you consider that you go back to the Babylonian captivity, when Judah, the southern kingdom of Judah, the Jews, were taken to captivity in Babylon, when Cyrus allowed them to come back, most of them stayed. we get it in our heads that they just all came back. It was just this mass migration back to Judah. Most of them stayed behind, and they were established there. They were established in Persia, in Babylon. Daniel talks about being in Susa, which was one of the capitals of Persia. I mean, they stayed behind. Okay, and it's very likely that there were still a good amount of Jews in this area in Babylon at the time Peter was writing his letters. Okay, and what does Paul say? Paul was supposed to go to the nations, to the Gentiles. Okay, that includes the other houses of Israel. That includes Issachar, Dan, Ephraim, etc. Okay, those guys, plus the mixed multitude, all the other non-Israelite nations. That was Paul's mission. Peter was to the Jews. Well, if he's supposed to evangelize to the Jews, where's he going to go? He's going to go where the Jews are, right? The Jews, most of them stayed behind in Babylon. So if you still had colonies of Jews in Babylon, it makes perfect sense that he would be literally writing from Babylon on one of his missionary trips to those Jews. Okay, so that's the last mention that we have in the actual Bible of where Peter was. So it's possible he could still be somewhere in Babylon. He could be in, hiding out in a cave in the Zagros Mountains in Iran, which is kind of near where Susa used to be. I mean, we don't know. It's just interesting to me that if it's just, that would just be blockbuster. If Yahshua had allowed these two men to live all this time, and then he's just saving them for this last go where he just unleashes them and they just get the full truth, and just put everybody to shame. I mean, can you imagine like this? I mean, if these guys come on the scene, okay, and they're telling, let's say hypothetically these guys are like, well, yeah, he never did away with the commandments. He never said to worship on Sunday. He never said any of this stuff. I mean, do you really think that mainstream Christianity is just going to go along with that? I mean, look at just us. Look at the pushback that the Hebrew Roots Messianic movement gets. We get hit pieces written on us all the time. We got preachers from the pulpit, talking about how we're preaching doctrines of demons and all this stuff. They don't even take the time to study out what we're talking about. They just go into this knee jerk. My theology is attacked here, so I have to defend it. People don't like being told that they're wrong. They just don't. And we see that later in Revelation. As they go along, they're being punished. You've got these bowls of wrath coming. It's just all out chaos, and they just double down, just like Pharaoh did. Their hearts were hardened. They doubled down and they refused to yield. Okay, so I mean, that's a distinct possibility to me. If these guys come saying something unpopular like that, of course they're going to be hated. And same thing, if they're out there telling, because it says they're going to be in Jerusalem. I'll get to that in a minute. If they're telling the Jews, hey guys, Jesus, Yahshua was actually the Messiah and you missed it, you really think they're going to want to hear that? You've got the head of the Sanhedrin over in Jerusalem. There's video of this. Look it up. It's on a channel called Arise. I think it's got a $sign in it somewhere. Maybe it's RI$E or something. But the guy is interviewing the head of the Sanhedrin, and the guy says basically, look, we would rather go back to Auschwitz than to acknowledge Jesus as the Messiah. Seriously? This is the mindset of a lot of these people. Now imagine if John and Peter or whoever were coming and saying, look, you guys are wrong. He's the Messiah. You think they're going to be popular among the Jews? Probably not. So to me, it makes perfect sense that these two would be chosen by Yahshua to come and do this. Okay. This is just, again, I'm just throwing this out there as a possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen. So if these guys don't show up, Don't come saying, well, James, you said Peter and John. No, I'm not saying that they are the two witnesses or will be. I'm saying let's be open-minded to that possibility. Okay. Now, to go back to Revelation 11, I'm going to kind of approach some of this just thematically and point you in different places. If you studied prophecy any time, you probably made some of these connections already, so I'm not going to dwell on every little thing point by point. Then there was given me a measuring rod like a staff, and someone said, "Get up and measure the temple of Elohim and the altar and those who worship in it. Leave out the court which is outside the temple and do not measure it, for it's been given to the nations, and they will tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months." Holy city, remember that. "And I will grant authority to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the master of all the earth. And if anyone wants to harm them, fire flows out of their mouth and devours their enemies. So if anyone wants to harm them, he must be killed in this way. These have the power to shut up the sky so that rain will not fall during the days of their prophesying, and they have power over the waters to turn them into blood and to strike the earth with every plague as often as they desire." Now, this is where a lot of people get on the two witnesses being Elijah and Moses, because Elijah shut up the sky. He stopped it raining for 3.5 years. Moses brought on, the plague of blood in the water. Okay, well, obviously there's a connection there. Okay, it's possible. Okay, I'm not ruling that out. Okay, it's possible. This whole section here, though, basically takes us back to Zechariah 4. I'm not going to read it, but if you go to Zechariah 4, it talks about the two lampstands. It talks about Zerubbabel, and it's interesting because when it talks about at the end of that section, it talks about it's talking about the branches too, and it talks about at the end, in the literal, it says that these are the two sons of fresh oil. And you can interpret that to mean these are the two anointed sons or sons of anointing, because when you anoint someone, you anoint them with fresh oil, you pour it on their head, right? So just something to consider there. The 42 months and the 1260 days, I did a study it's on this channel called "How Long is the Tribulation?" I encourage you to take a look at that. It's just audio, so you don't get to see my pretty face. But I give some alternate time frames on what these can mean. Obviously, 1260 days is 1260 days. 42 months may not be 42 months like we consider. I'm not going to give the explanation. You can just check that video out. It's 20-something minutes. It's not a big deal. Anyway, so these guys are in sackcloth. They're mourning for whatever reason. Anyway, to continue, when they finish their testimony, the beast that comes out of the abyss will make war with them and overcome them and kill them. And I think we might be given a clue in this next little bit, although I don't know what to make of it. But I'm going to bring it to your attention in case you do. Part of what I'm trying to do here is to ask questions to get people to think, because I really feel like each of us has a piece of the puzzle, and if we can just get together and work it out, we can come a long way towards figuring this out. I still don't believe 100% that we're going to be able to know every single thing before it happens, but I think we can get to a spot where we're more aware of what's going to happen, and we know more what to look for, what the signs of the times are going to be before it does actually start to shake down. So that's my plea to you, is that you take a look at this with an open mind and see if you can add anything to this. See if you can take some of these concepts and some of these ideas and run with them, because maybe your brain can process it where mine can't. That's what I'm really hoping for. Okay. Anyway, where was I? Their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city, which secretly is called Sodom and Egypt, where also their master was crucified. Where was our master crucified? Was he crucified in Rome? Was he crucified in New York City? He was crucified in Jerusalem. Okay. This is clearly happening in Jerusalem. All right. Now, those from the peoples and tribes and tongues and nations will look at their dead bodies for 3.5 days and will not permit their dead bodies to be laid in a tomb. Now, in my NASB, it has a footnote for verse 9. Okay. We just read in verse 8, and their dead bodies, plural, will lie in the street. Verse 9, those from the peoples and tribes and nations will look at their dead bodies. Literally, its body singular. Okay, so you have dead bodies plural. Now you have dead body singular, and then it's going to switch back to to plural again. I'm thinking that there's something significant to that, but I don't know what it is. So if you do, please let me know. I am me on Facebook. Let me know in the comments. However you need to. Let's work together on it. Maybe you have some insight. Those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and celebrate, and they will send gifts to one another. And because these two prophets tormented those who dwell on the earth, so these are not popular guys. People are rejoicing over their death. Okay, they're not getting parades for man of the year. Okay. After 3.5 days, the breath of life from Yahweh came into them, and they stood on their feet, and great fear fell upon those who were watching them. They heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, "Come up here." Then they went up into heaven in the cloud, and their enemies watched them. And in that hour there was a great earthquake, and a tenth of the city fell. 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake, and the rest were terrified and gave glory to the Elohim of heaven. Okay, so in Revelation 20, we read about the first resurrection. Okay, it talks about those who were killed by the beast. These guys were just killed by the beast, right? So they're the ones that rise in that first resurrection. They're the ones that rule with Yahshua for 1,000 years. So I'm wondering if this is a timing clue here. The events here when they're dead for 3.5 days, but then they rise. What if they're rising as part of that resurrection? Because it doesn't say that they were the only two people that rise. We assume that because the context is all about them. But what if they're just a part of that resurrection? Okay, just something to think about. I'm not saying that that's true or not, but just something to think about. I'm going to skip over the next few verses that's talking about the trumpets. I'm not going to really talk about the trumpets. I want to get into chapter 12. Now this, I forgot something. Let me back up. Chapter 11, verse 8. Their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city, which mystically is called Sodom and Egypt. Okay. Now, Sodom and Egypt. Why did he put it there? Why did he give us that little nugget? Okay. You go back and you look at Sodom. You see some similarities here. Okay. You have a place that's condemned for its wickedness. It's going to be destroyed. It's going to be judged. You have a righteous person living there, Lot and his family. And you have two angels who come. They've witnessed this, and they come and tell Lot it's going to be destroyed. We need to get you out of here. That's an Exodus. They pulled him out of there. Okay. Once he was out, they destroyed the cities, the 5 cities in the area, fire and brimstone. Okay. And it was done. Now, when the men of the city were coming to Lot's door and they wanted to rape these angels, okay, look around what's going on now, folks. They're trying to force us to worship at the rainbow altar. Okay. It's getting rabid. Okay. They are trying to assimilate us into a homosexual, all sexual culture. Okay. So it's the signs of the times. This is what we're looking at in Lot's day. These guys were so deviant that they wanted to drag these men out and rape them forcibly. Okay. So Lot offers his daughters instead, and I can't get my brain around that either. Maybe he's thinking like, I don't know what he was thinking, but he offered his daughters. They refused the women and insisted on the men. Okay. And then what do they tell Lot? Who are you Johnny come lately? Who made you a judge over us? Okay. So think about that. Keep that in mind. Okay. Then we go to the Exodus from Egypt. You have the same kind of thing. Egypt is wicked. You've got this remnant Israel there, and it's missed. And 2 witnesses, Moses and Aaron, come to bring judgment at the hand of, by the hand of Yahweh on Egypt. They lead the people out. Okay, that's a fairly straightforward parallel. But what did the Hebrews say when Moses kills the Egyptian? and he buries the Egyptian, and then he sees these two Hebrews fighting, and he scolds them. They say, "Who are you? Who made you a judge over us?" You got the same language. Okay. Now, yes, that could be a coincidence, but I don't think it is. Okay. I really don't think it is. I think there's a reason why he's pointing us towards Sodom and Egypt in this specific context. Okay. So we need to be looking, and Joshua himself said it's going to be like the days of Lot, and we have prophecy after prophecy talking about, how we're going to have this next Exodus that's going to be so big it's going to make the first Exodus. We're just going to forget about it. There's going to be an Exodus, guys. It's there's not going to be a rapture up to heaven where we're all just going to park up there with harps forever. There's going to be a gathering of Yahweh's people back into the promised land on earth. Now, if you look at the whole thing in context, it's going to be, you're going to have people resurrected there, and you're also going to have people living regular lives there for a while. I mean, it's there. We're not going to be up on a cloud in heaven, singing, "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot" or whatever. That's not the reality. It makes us all warm and fuzzy, and it sounds great, but that's not the reality when you take the whole Bible in context and actually pull out what it says. Okay, we have to be willing. If we're going to say that this book is divinely inspired, that it's God breathed, then we need to actually accept it for what it says and stop trying to read what we want it to say. There was a little boy, that his dad and whatever wrote a book a few years ago, like about he died and he went to heaven and he talked to God and Jesus and all this stuff. Then he comes out and says it's a lie. He lied about the whole thing. Well, yeah, in the book of Acts, Peter says that David hasn't even ascended to heaven. Wait, David hasn't ascended to heaven? And Solomon talks about, in Ecclesiastes, the dead know nothing. So like when you die, if you look at what the Bible says, when you die, you stay in the ground, Sheol, the grave, until the resurrection. And then you're put in, assuming you're in the first resurrection, you're put in a glorified body, like Yahshua's. Then you're brought over into the promised land on earth. Okay, that's the context when you look at everything as and just rightly divide the word. And second resurrection, there's no indication of being put in any kind of body. So you are there before the throne and you are being judged at that point. But the first resurrection, there's I mean, think why would we and if you're just going to live in heaven forever, then what's the point of resurrecting your body? What's the point of bringing you up out of the ground? So you're just going to go up to heaven for however long, and then you got to go back to earth, be back in your body, but then come right back up to heaven. It doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. I hate to burst anyone's bubble, but it just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, I digress. I went off there. But anyway, there's a reason why he mentioned Sodom and Egypt there. Okay, to go back to Revelation 12. If you have been on YouTube, if you've looked at prophetic ministries and whatnot, you've heard of the Revelation 12 sign, right? That supposedly happened, I think it was September 27th last year. Somebody will say it happened the year before, and the year before, and the year before. There's always somebody saying, oh, well, this is the year we're seeing the sign, okay? And here's how it works in those interpretations. You have the constellation Virgo, okay, the Virgin, right? She has a crown of 12 stars. There's different interpretations of that. It could be literal 12 stars. It could be a conjunction of some stars and planets. It could be, whatever. She's giving birth. The man-child is the planet Jupiter. The king star in ancient cultures is coming out from her womb, whatever. That's the basic sign, right? Okay. There's been hundreds of videos put up on Facebook about it specifically last year. Okay. Guys, that's bogus. It's absolutely bogus. Okay. Let's read through this together and let's put that to bed, because I am telling you for a fact that is bogus. There's no room for it just is. It's bogus. Okay. I hate to hurt anyone's feelings if you believe that, but that's not rightly interpreting what's being said here. So let's read. A great sign appeared in heaven. Where's John? Where's John when he's seeing this? He's in heaven. He's not on the ground looking up at the stars. He's in heaven when he sees this. Okay, location, 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 right? A woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars, and she was with child, and she cried out, being in labor and in pain to give birth. Now, we assume this is Israel because of Jacob's vision, or sorry, Joseph's dream, about, the sun, moon, and 11 stars are going to bow down and worship me. Okay, so it's so similar, we just kind of assume that this is Israel. And I'm not saying that it's not, but I think to say 100% for sure that it is, we need to be careful with that, okay? So this is that star sign. This is the constellation thing. People are like looking up in this, they're going to look up in the stars and see this, okay? Then another sign appeared in heaven. Now, remember, if we're going to be consistent, we've also got to look up in the sky and see this in a constellation, okay? So let's explain this. And I haven't seen anybody do it yet. And behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads were 7 crowns. And his tail sweeps away a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. The dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she gave birth, he might devour her child. Okay? Now, where did this happen? Where's the constellation? Where's the star sign for this? When we look up in the skies, where's this? Has it happened yet? Can you go on Stellarium or whatever, night sky? Can you find this? I have yet to see anybody do it, but yeah, we're so convinced that those first few verses about the woman are the Virgo sign. Okay. Now, we'll keep reading. And she gave birth to a son, a man. Okay. Now, this is literally what it says in the Greek. She's not giving birth to a baby infant. She's giving birth to a full-grown man. Okay. Who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. We know who that is, right? Goes without saying. And her child was caught up to Elohim and to his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared by Yahweh, so that there she would be nourished for 1,260 days. So this woman, if we're going to be consistent, this woman is the constellation Virgo in the sky. But she's going to flee into the wilderness, where she's going to be nourished for 1,260 days. Nobody sees the issue with that, I guess. If we're going to be consistent, that makes 0 sense. Okay? John is seeing something that's symbolic of something. He's not looking up and seeing a constellation. Okay, guys? He's just not. And with the dragon, the description of the dragon is going to be very consistent with what we see in Revelation 13 and then Revelation 17 when we go back to Daniel chapter 7. Okay? It's very consistent. So are those constellations too? I don't think so. We're not looking at stars here, people. We're just not. Now, this is I'm gonna speculate again here. I'm gonna throw this out there because I think that this is giving us a hint as far as the timing. Okay, who is the man? The man she gave birth. Assuming that this woman is Israel, who's the man she gave birth to? Yahshua, right? Okay. When was Yahshua caught up to heaven and to his throne? To Yahweh's throne. When was he caught up? What does he do when he rises? He tells Mary, "Don't cling to me because I haven't ascended to my Father yet." Okay, so it doesn't really say when he ascends at that point. We assume that it was shortly after that. And there's symbolism with first fruits, the wave sheaf, all that stuff. Those are kind of assumptions. We don't know 100% for sure. We do know for sure, based on the book of Acts, chapter 1, that he ascended about the 40th day of the counting of the Omer. Okay, because he was there for 40 days, before he ascended. So he was, if he ascended like we think on the wave sheaf, on the Feast of First Fruits, that starts your count to Pentecost. That starts your count to 50. Okay, so if he was there for 40 days, he would have ascended to his Father on day 40 or possibly day 41 of the counting of the Omer. And what did the angels tell the disciples there? They said, this same Yahshua whom you see ascending, is going to return the same way. Okay. Now we know he's going to come back out of heavens. We know all that. Is it possible that we could also be talking timing? Okay. So is it possible that the child being caught up, if that's Yahshua, it's either A, on the Feast of First Fruits, when he possibly rose, ascended to heaven after seeing Mary Magdalene, or is it possible that this could be sometime on the 40th day of the counting of the Omer? In other words, is this giving us a time frame on when this is going to start? Because right away he goes in there talking about 1,260 days. Did we start counting that back on September 27th of last year? Nobody that I know of has. Okay. No person here has gone into the wilderness to be nourished yet that I know of. Okay. Maybe you know somebody. I don't know. But I'm thinking that this is a clue telling us when this 1260 is going to start. Now, I don't know what year, obviously. But when it starts, maybe we should be looking for the Feast of First Fruits or the 40th day of the counting of the Omer. Do you see why this is important to understand and to keep the feasts of Yahweh, the holy days of Yahweh? Because so much of what he does goes around those feast days and their timing and the symbolism and everything. Okay. We'll keep reading. There was war in heaven, Michael and his angels waging war with the dragon. The dragon and his angels waged war, and they were not strong enough, and there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. The great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. And he was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Now, my whole life, I've heard that this is Satan, this is Lucifer. Prior to the creation of the earth, he rebelled against God, was kicked out of heaven with a third of the angels. They're the demons, etc., etc., etc. This is clearly future, guys. The context of this is clearly future from when John was given the vision. So how can we take this back to before creation and apply it to the devil and say he was kicked out of heaven? This is a coming event, guys. It didn't happen yet. Okay. We've got to be looking for this to happen, because what does it say? We keep reading. Now the salvation, the power, and the kingdom of our Elohim and the authority of his Messiah have come. For the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down. He accuses them before our Elohim day and night. If this happened before creation, this makes no sense. This is clearly something that's coming. They overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb. Key in on that. And because of the word of their testimony, and they did not love their life even when faced with death. For this reason, rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, knowing that he has only a short time. Now, I told you to key in on the blood of the Lamb. Okay. Now, we all assume when he talks about the blood of the Lamb right here, they overcame because of the blood of the Lamb. That's the atoning blood of Yahshua, the Lamb. Okay. True. But where else in the Bible do we read about the blood of the Lamb? Very important concept when we deal with Passover. Okay. So we just, and I don't have time to do it in this presentation, but you can do it yourself. You're smart enough to see it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Take a look at this. Read this section that we're reading here. Go back to Exodus, start in chapter 1, and read from there all the way through. To the crossing, to Mount Sinai. Read the whole thing. Okay. This is a clear parallel. This is second Exodus here, guys. This is the repeat of the first Exodus. He's just describing it in a different way. Okay. So the blood of the Lamb is important, I think, here in the context of Passover. Okay. Now, I'm not telling you to go out. I am telling you that you should keep Passover unequivocally. Yes, you should be keeping Passover. Messiah kept Passover. He told us to walk after him, follow after him. It's logical that we're going to do what he did. He didn't keep Easter. So anyway, So Passover, and I want to go back here. Okay, we're talking about the lamb. I'm going to go back to Revelation chapter 5, verse 6. And I saw between the throne with the four living creatures, the elders, a lamb standing as if slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of Yahweh, sent out into all the earth. And he came and took the book out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. This is the book that's got the 7 seals on it, the scroll. When he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each one holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense. And then they keep going. Okay. So this Lamb is standing as if slain. Key in on that phrase there, as if slain. This is important. Okay. So he's standing as a slain. Now imagine this visual. Okay. John is looking at a lamb standing on its hind legs, just standing, presumably. Well, a lamb does, well, maybe not necessarily. That's how I envision. I guess he could be on all fours. But he's standing as if slain. Now, if John's looking at this, what would trigger him to think this lamb looks like it's been slain? It's got a slit throat. Okay? This lamb is covered in blood, its own blood. Okay, let that sink in. And it's got 7 horns and 7 eyes. That's got to be quite a sight. So there's another Passover visual, if you're willing to accept it. Okay, so this is important, guys. I really think Passover is going to play into this heavily, and I think he's giving us some major hints here. But keep that as if slain in your back pocket, because we're going to visit it as we go on. It's a recurring theme here. Okay, so we'll keep reading. I saw the dragon thrown down. When the dragon saw he was thrown down to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the man. Of course, this is all back before man was even created, right? When Lucifer fell. Sorry, I got snarky there. I didn't mean to be that way. But the 2 wings of the great eagle were given to the woman. You go back and read the Exodus. It talks about, I think it's in the Song of Moses, talks about you bore us, out of there on the wings of an eagle. Same type of language. So that she could fly into the wilderness to her place where she was nourished for a time, times and half a time from the presence of the serpent. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, so that he might cause her to be swept away with the flood. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened his mouth and drank up the river which the dragon poured out of his mouth. This sounds kind of like the inverse of the Red Sea crossing. The Red Sea crossing, the waters opened up and helped the people. This time it's the earth opening up and helping the people. I don't know what that's going to look like, but it's inverse symbolism, So the dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her children who keep the testimony of Jesus. I intentionally left something out there to call your attention to it. It actually says, who keep the commandments of God, Yahweh, and hold the testimony of Yahshua. Why would he list both of those things specifically and in parallel like that? Okay, because we're taught in Christianity, it's all about the gospel, right? It's all about the gospel of Jesus. Okay, that's all you need. Christ crucified, that's it, right? But these guys are keeping the commandments of God, of Yahweh. Okay, so why is he mentioning that specifically if all there is just the testimony of the gospel of Yahshua? It's important to be keeping the commandments, people. What did he say? If you love me, you'll keep my commandments. I've talked about in previous videos before how he, Yahshua, Jesus, is the one who gave the commandments from Mount Sinai. So when he says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments, that's what he's talking about, guys. He's not talking about, I can't think of anything specific. He didn't give any specific temporal commandments that hadn't already been given. He clarified some, he maybe put a spiritual angle on some of them, but he didn't really give any new commandments. He just didn't. So why is the dragon enraged at these people? Why is he enraged? These are people, and I think this is the distinction. Okay, now we know We know that Christians are being persecuted all around the world right now. China is horrific. Okay. You look at Voice of the Martyrs, you look around all over the world where Christians are being persecuted, and we sit here over in America and we gripe and moan about our jobs and our cars breaking down and all. There are people over there being tortured, guys. Christians, followers of Christ, who have the faith and the belief, being tortured. Now, I don't know 100% what their beliefs are or what their theology is. It does not negate the fact that they are willing to die for the Messiah, guys. This is huge. Okay. Most of those people are not keeping the commandments, not intentionally anyway. Imagine if you took that and added the other angle. In addition to that, which is bad enough, the world hates that as it is. Now add this other dimension of they're also going to keep the commandments. I mean, just there's so many logistical things here, like with the UN talking about, oh well, to cut down on greenhouse gas and stuff, we've got to get rid of beef, AOC is talking about that, no more cow farts. We've got to stop eating meat, all this stuff. We got to, curb agriculture because we're destroying the planet. So the UN has this plan where we're just going to feed everybody bugs. Okay. That's going to be your food source. Bugs are easy to grow and raise. We're just going to raise a bunch of cockroaches, grind them up, make meat patties, and there's your roach burger. That's a serious on the books plan the UN has, guys. This is real. Okay. And if you believe in keeping the commandments of Yahweh, you know that eating cockroaches and stuff is a sin. It's not food. It was never food. It never will be food. Just because you can put something in your mouth. My kid was going around eating rocks today, not eating them, but chewing on them. Like, really, a 2-year-old just shove stuff in their mouth. Okay, we're not 2-year-olds, guys. We should be smart enough, I mean, anybody out there is going to freak out if they go to a restaurant and a dead mouse is on their plate, with like a nice custard sauce or something. That's not food. Well, yeah, of course it's not food, but Yahweh specifically told us that it wasn't food, but yet we're going to say that pig is okay to eat. Pig is food. Why? Who made that decision? Yahweh didn't make that decision. We made that decision because we wanted to eat pork because it's easy to raise pigs and they're cheap. Pork tastes good. Yeah, I used to love pork. To this day, somebody fries up pork bacon, I foam at the mouth, I salivate, but I don't eat it because it's not food. I only have that concept of it tasting good and smelling good because I used to eat it. And it was familiar to me for most of my life up into my adult years. That's the only reason why. If I had never eaten it in a day of my life, I wouldn't have that context. I wouldn't have that draw to it, So, I mean, yeah, just imagine adding that extra layer. It's these guys are going to go beyond just being troublemakers for being Christians. These guys are also going one step further and saying we ain't going to do all that stuff. We're not going to syncretize our holy days that we worship on. We're not going to work on the seventh day of the week. When you decide to enforce labor laws on the whole world, and do all this stuff, this is out there, guys. The EU's been cooking this up forever. The UN has stuff like this in the pipeline. I think Poland passed some laws a year or two ago, basically forcing businesses to shut down on Sundays and stay open on Saturdays. And the idea is well, we want to give people a rest. Well, yeah, people need a rest. We're going to give people a rest so they can spend time with their families, and we're going to build a family unit. And then this will also cut down on emissions and stuff because factories will only be open 6 days a week and not 7, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But instead of picking the day that Yahweh chose to do all that, the seventh day of the week, they're going to choose the first. Well, guess what? If they want you to work on Sabbath, what are you going to do? You're either going to do it or you're going to not do it. And if you choose not to do it, do you really think you're going to make them happy? I mean, no. So no wonder the dragon is angry at these people because they keep the commandments of Yahweh and the testimony of Yahshua. Okay. And by the way, calls them saints. Not in this particular verse, but it does later. Whew. Wow, I'm over an hour. Okay. Revelation 13. The dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on its horns were 10 crowns. On its heads were blasphemous names. Now, here is another potential clue. Pay close attention to this. You probably read over this a gazillion times if you study prophecy, and you might not have ever noticed it. I didn't notice this till the other day, and I've been looking at this heavy for about 15 years. Okay? Go back to Revelation 12. Pay attention in verse 3. The great red dragon has 7 heads. 7 heads, 10 horns, and then 7 crowns. So the order is heads, horns, crowns. Okay? We go over to Revelation 13. This beast has 10 horns, 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 crowns. The order is different. Now, that might be nothing. That's possible, maybe even likely. But I think we need to be switched on to the fact that it could be something. I don't know what it is. If it is something, I haven't cracked it yet. I'm throwing it out there for consideration. Maybe you can figure that out. I don't know. But I think it is worth a look. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. This goes back to Revelation 7. He's basically got all those 4 beasts in Revelation 7 described as one beast here. Okay? It's a conglomerate of those 4 beasts. And if you watch or listen to, because I'm not in visual form in that one either, but the one I did, Will There Be a Revived Roman Empire? I talk about this, It's clear from the context in Daniel's vision that all 4 of those beasts, all 4 of the kingdoms that they represent are going to coexist with each other at the same time at the end of the age. It's not Rome. It's not Egypt. Not Egypt. It's not Rome. It's not Greece. It's not Medo-Persia. It's not Babylon. Okay, not literally anyway. There's not going to be a revived Roman Empire, folks. It's not going to happen. And I'm not going to get into it here because I'd be, even longer. But listen to that teaching. It's like 20 some odd minutes. It's not that long. Anyway. The dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. Now remember, this dragon is the same one that we read about back in Revelation 12 that appeared in heaven as a sign. So this must be a constellation. Or not, right? Okay. I saw one of the heads as if it had been slain. Where have we heard that before? I mentioned earlier, keep that phrase in your back pocket, because when we were looking at the lamb earlier, Yahshua, I saw a lamb standing as if it had been slain with 7 horns and 7 eyes. This has a head as if it had been slain. Is it a coincidence that we have the same language? I don't think it is. And his fatal wound was healed. The whole earth was amazed and followed after the beast. They worshipped the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who is able to wage war with him?" There was given him a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies, and authority to act for 42 months was given him. And he opened his mouth in blasphemies against Yahweh, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven. So I am thinking lately, based on the phrase there. Now, if we connect those dots and we use it as a link between the two concepts, okay, the lamb was standing as if slain. Now we've got ahead of this beast as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed. I'm thinking that one of these heads, this head in question, is going to have something to do with Christianity. It's a Christian nation. It's a Christian leader, whatever. It's going to have an overt Christian flavor to it, And I know that this is not something that anyone wants to hear. I don't really want to say it either, you know, but when we look at Christianity as an institution, I'm not talking about you, if you're a Christian out there watching this. I'm talking about the institution, the religious system. Okay. When we look at Christianity and we look at its fruits, it's rotten generally. It really is. You look at the nations who are Christian, who identify as Christian, you look at their fruits and it's filthy. Look at America. 70% of us identify as Christians, somehow, some way. And yet look at us. Europe is less so. They become more secular. They become more Muslim, They're less and less Christian. But I mean, look at the nations who have a Christian population and then look at the fruits of that nation. Guys, it's not what Messiah taught us. It's not how he showed us how to live. Why is that? It's either A, because Christians, under the influence of the institution of Christianity, have made it that way, or B, they have stood aside and let other non-Christians come in and make it that way. Either way, where's the problem? So is it really that far-fetched to think that Christianity would have a role to play in the end times and in a negative way? I really don't think it is. I mean, we've seen historically, the Inquisition, the Catholic Church. I mean, we want to talk about what Hitler did. We want to talk about Stalin. We want to talk about the Armenian genocide, all these things. Take a look at the Inquisition. How many people were brutally tortured, and murdered by the Inquisition, by the Catholic Church, and then, you're going to say, well, that's just the Catholics. No. You go back and you look at Protestant history too. John Calvin. Now I'm going to pick on one man here. There are others, but John Calvin's a famous example. Okay, Mr. Protestant. There was a guy he was corresponding with named Michael Servetus, a doctor and theologian. Okay, who had different views on the Trinity, on the Godhead. John Calvin gave him over to the Inquisition for execution. That's Christ-like, right? That's brotherly love. That's a Protestant, guys. That's one of the fathers of the Protestant Reformation. Handed over a man who disagreed with him theologically and was no real threat other than that to the Inquisition to be executed. You probably don't hear about that in church on Sundays, do you? You probably don't hear about that in your commentaries, anything from the seminaries. But it's true. Christians have a long history of murdering other Christians. It's true. It just is. And you even with the Nazis. How many of those Nazi Germans identified as Christians? I mean, let's be real here, guys. Just because you identify as a Christian doesn't mean you're immune to doing wicked things like this. And I'm not saying you, the one watching this. I mean, people in general. We're human. Okay? And it's just how it is. So don't be surprised if the beast comes along and it has a distinctly Christian flavor to it. So to keep reading, it's also given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is destined for captivity, to captivity he goes. If anyone kills with the sword he must be killed. Here is the perseverance and faith of the saints. I talked about that at length in one called The Coming Captivity. It's kind of a doom and gloom message. Not many people have watched it, and that's okay. But I go into this concept a lot, and I track it back to Israel, and I track it back to the words of Jeremiah, and try to put it in context. This is judgment that's coming on Yahweh's people, and this beast is the one doing the judging. Then I saw another beast coming out of the earth. He had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. He exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he makes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast whose fatal wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. So here's the signs and wonders kind of thing, okay? So why? Why is he doing this? Why is he doing the signs? Why is he calling down fire and doing this stuff? There's a scripture, I forget where it is, but it talks about the reason why we are given signs and wonders is basically to strengthen our faith. Okay, so this beast is doing the signs and these wonders here to strengthen our faith in the beast, and ultimately the dragon who gives the beast his power. Okay. He deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which it was given to him to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come to life. So there it specifies where the wound came from. This fatal wound that was healed came from a sword. Okay. Now we can say literally, maybe he was stabbed with a sword, whatever, we don't know. But also figuratively, the sword is often used in the context of war. And Ezekiel, he talks about sending, pestilence, the sword. It's war. Okay. So this beast, if it's a nation, could have been defeated in a war and then somehow comes back from it. And people are amazed because they're looking and they're like, how on earth did this happen? We thought this nation was crushed and destroyed, but yet here it is in all this strength, and something like that would defy human logic. So you have to think at some point there has to be a divine supernatural element to this. There has to be a higher up, bringing this country back, to power. You know what I mean? And this is not just like a Germany thing, where you have the Weimar Republic and then, I don't think it's that. This is like a nation that's completely destroyed, but then yet somehow is able to come back and then do what we're reading about here. It was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast would even speak and cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Okay. This sounds a lot like Daniel. You go back and you read the first few chapters of Daniel. This Nebuchadnezzar had the statue put up of himself, and everybody had to come and worship it. The ones who didn't would be killed. He causes all the small and the great, the rich and the poor, the free men and the slaves. So no doubt about it, this is everybody. Everybody falls in one of these categories. To be given a mark on their right hand and on the forehead. Now, he provides that no one will be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. This is not a microchip. It's not a tattoo. It's not a social security number. It's not a barcode. It's not Bitcoin. It's not any of those things. Now, Bitcoin might have something to do with it. Now, I'll get to that in a minute. But we have to go to the Old Testament. We have to go left of Matthew to understand what we're reading about here. So I'm going to go back to Deuteronomy chapter 6. I'm going to start in verse 4. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our God. Yahweh is one. You shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. These words which I am commanding you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons and shall talk of them when... Let me back up a minute. On your heart? Doesn't that sound familiar with the new covenant? The commandments are supposed to be written on our heart. It was always our Creator's intention for his commandments to be on our heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons and shall talk of them when you sit in the house and when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise up. All the time. You're supposed to be talking about Yahweh's commandments. Why? So you don't forget them. Okay? Like Dory, in Finding Nemo. She has to constantly repeat the same thing over and over and over again or she forgets it. We're no different. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead. Okay? You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Now, the Jews will do this. The Orthodox will literally, they'll tie, these things on their hand, and then they'll have a little box with some little Torah scrolls or whatever written in it that they attach to their forehead, literally. Okay? Think about this logically. Okay? Your hand is your action. Your hand is what you do. Anything I put my hand to, I'm going to prosper, hopefully. Right? You've heard that phrase, right? Your forehead is your mind. Okay? So these commandments are supposed to be in your mind and in your deeds. That's all that's really saying, And so let's go to, I'm going to go to Ezekiel and give you some more context on what this sign is. Ezekiel chapter 9. Then he cried out in my hearing with a loud voice, saying, Draw near, O executioners of the city, each with his destroying weapon in his hand. Behold, 6 men came from the direction of the upper gate, which faces north, each with his shattering weapon in his hand. And among them was a certain man clothed in linen, with a writing case at his loins. And they went in and stood beside the bronze altar. Then the glory of the Elohim of Israel went up from the cherub on which it had been to the threshold of the temple. He called to the man clothed in linen, and at whose loins was the writing case. Yahweh said to him, Go through the midst of the city, even through the midst of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and groan over all the abominations which are being committed in its midst. But to the others he said in my hearing, Go through the city after him and strike. Do not let your eyes pity and do not spare. Utterly slay old men, young men, maidens, little children, and women, but do not touch any man on whom is the mark, and you shall start from my sanctuary. So they started with the elders who were before the temple. And he said to them, Defile the temple and fill the courts with the slain. Go out. Thus they went out and struck down the people in the city. As they were striking the people, and I alone was left, I fell on my face and cried out, saying, Alas, Yahweh Elohim, are you destroying the whole remnant of Israel by pouring out your wrath on Jerusalem? Then he said to me, The iniquity of the house of Israel and Judah. You see that phrase all the time. He's talking about the northern kingdom of 10 tribes and the southern kingdom. It's very, very great. The land is filled with blood, and the city is full of perversion. For they say, Yahweh has forsaken the land, and Yahweh does not see. But as for me, my eye will have no pity, nor will I spare, but I will bring their conduct upon their heads. Then behold, the man clothed in linen, at whose loins was a writing case, reported, saying, I have done just as you have commanded me. Did Ezekiel have a microchip in his head? Was it a tattoo? I mean, no. Okay. Yeah, anyway. So this is not going to be a physical mark. Okay. Now, it does say that these people who don't have the mark are not going to be able to buy or sell. Now, logically, there has to be some mechanism for that. Okay. Whatever this mark of the beast is, if the mark of Yahweh is, now think about this. Why would you sigh and moan for the abominations committed in Israel? What are the abominations Yahweh's talking about? You read it other places in Ezekiel. It's idolatry. It's breaking the commandments. It's doing all the stuff that Yahweh said not to do. Okay? Idolatry. Look around. Every single Catholic church is full of idols. Protestant churches have idols, a lot of them. An idol is a thing that you make. It's a representation. And then you worship it. Really? You go into a church and you see people bowing down before crucifixes, before statues of Mary, before you have people going to the Vatican and kissing statues of Peter, which is actually an old sculpture of Jupiter that they're calling Peter. They've kissed his feet so many times his toes are practically gone. Guys, that's idolatry. That's an abomination. That's what Yahweh is talking about here. And it's got to stop. We got to cut it out. And I say that knowing full well that it's not going to happen. This is why judgment is coming on us. Because we are a nation, we are a people of idolatry. And we don't see it. And if we do see it, we don't care because it's what we're comfortable with. It's what mom and dad and grandpa and grandma taught us. It goes way back. So it's what we've always done, right? Tradition. It doesn't make it right. It's still an abomination to Yahweh. Okay? So if you have the mark of the beast, you are thinking and doing his commandments. If you have the mark of Yahweh, you are thinking and doing his commandments. It's that simple. Okay? It's just that simple. Now let's think about this logically. Buying and selling. I do my best to keep Yahweh's commandments. Okay? The mark of the beast is out. We're in that time. I go into Walmart, to buy, I don't know, pencils. Okay? How are they going to know? Well, obviously, you have a microchip in your head. Come on. Okay? Take away the physical. Take away the physical marks. I walk into Walmart. How are they going to know? The only way that they can possibly know is if there is some obvious way that I am not conforming to their commandments. Okay, so I'm going to throw out a couple examples of what that might look like. Notice how I said might. Sabbath. Okay, I mentioned earlier that there's a push. You may not know it or not, but there is a push to mandate a 6-day work week, Monday through Saturday, with Sunday off. Okay, so if I refuse to comply with that, at first, maybe to get my attention and to kind of get me in line, they say, all right, we're shutting you out of the economic system until you comply. Okay. The only way they can really do that, if I walk into that Walmart, they have to have some way to know that I'm a Sabbath keeper, because I'm not going to go in there I could go in there Monday through Friday, but I'm not going in there on Sabbath. So just the fact that I'm not showing up on Sabbath doesn't necessarily mean that I'm, you know what I mean? But if you did have some kind of a currency like Bitcoin or whatever, and they know that you're a Sabbath keeper, shut down your account. It's that easy. If we go over to cashless where everything's in a computer, if they know that you're a Sabbath keeper, just shut down your account. And if everything is digital, you can't buy or sell because not only, your whole account is shut down. So you have no digital currency to pay, and you cannot receive digital currency because it can't get into your digital account. Okay. So I can see something like Bitcoin or something like that as a mechanism for enforcing the mark of the beast. But it in and of itself is not going to be the mark of the beast. It's just not. Okay. Another possibility. It's a commandment to wear tassels with a blue thread on the four corners of your garment. Okay. Now, the conventional thing that we see is Jews with their big prayer shawls on. They've got the long white tassels hanging down, no blue thread. So we're sort of keeping the commandment, but we're not really, because Judaism reserves the right to tweak and modify, just the way Christianity reserves the right to do away with. Okay. Either way, it's wrong. That would be a visible way. If I walk into Walmart with tassels with blue thread on, everybody's going to know who I serve. Okay. Just saying, now, if I choose not to wear tassels, does that automatically mean, that I've taken the mark of the beast? Maybe, because I'm choosing not to obey one of Yahweh's commandments by the definition I just set out. I don't know. But something to consider. Okay. Now, the number of the beast. We talk about all the gematria. You calculate the numbers. And Greek letters. It's Nero. It's Ronald Reagan. It's Trump. It's Obama. It's blah 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 blah. All this stuff. Okay. I'm not going to do it here, but go back to the book of Numbers. Okay. You'll read the census, and it will say like the number of Reuben was da 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 da. Or I'm sorry, the number of the name of Reuben was da 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 da. The number of the name of Simeon, da 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 da. Okay, so the number of a name is not, he's not telling you to do some kind of, Bible code kind of thing. He's just telling you this is the number of people who belong to a certain person. Okay, that's the Bible interpreting itself. Okay, but whenever you see a phrase, and that's why he says, "Here's wisdom. Let him who has understanding." Okay, this is not just going to be some easy thing that everybody can pick up. You have to reach for it. Okay, so whenever I see phrases like that, I look for matches elsewhere in the Scripture. And with today's modern technology, it's not that hard to do. You can go on Blue Letter Bible or whatever for free, and you can search for words or phrases. I mean, this tracks back to the book of Ezra. And he's talking about, the count of the people that were coming back from Babylon. I mentioned that earlier. People that are coming back from Babylon, there weren't a ton, but the ones that do come, it'll say like the number of such and such, the number of such and such, the name. Okay. We get to a guy named Adonikam. The number of Adonikam was 666. Okay. Now, when you read the same count in Nehemiah, it's 667. So, but when you look at those numbers as they're represented in Hebrew, the letters are close enough to where one of them could be a typo or a scribal error. Which one it is, we don't know. Okay. Maybe Nehemiah's right. Maybe the 667 is correct and the 666 is wrong. I don't know. But assuming that Ezra's count is correct and Adonikam's number is 666, what does Adonikam mean? You go and look up that name Adonikam, it means my Lord rises or my Lord has risen. Every year at Easter, my Facebook feed is flooded with "He is risen." Okay. Now I know where I'm going with this is going to make people uncomfortable, might make you angry. You might be throwing a chair across the room right now for all I know. Okay. But I strongly believe, based on what I'm reading here, that this beast system is going to be some type of Christianity. It's not going to be Islam. Okay? This is going to be some type of Christian system. You look at the history of the Christian church, they have always persecuted people who kept the Sabbath. You go back to Pella. You had the Waldensians. I mean, if the Christians, you go back to the Inquisition. The Catholic Church persecuted Jews for and the way that they knew that they were keeping the Sabbath was because in the winter you wouldn't see any smoke coming out of their chimneys because the Jews would not burn a fire on Sabbath. They wouldn't even kindle a fire in their fireplace to keep warm. So you're going through a neighborhood, you see smoke, 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 no smoke. Oh, there's Jews in that house. It's going to be the same concept in these last days when this Christian system takes over. They're going to be able to identify who is keeping Yahweh's commandments by what they do. And it will most likely have something to do with Sabbath. Sabbath will most likely be the thing. Okay. Now, we'll know when we see it. I can see there's a push headed that way right now. Whether that continues or not remains to be seen. I don't know. But there is a history of that. And I think that there's strong likelihood that it's going to continue and it's going to escalate as we come up into these last days. Now, I got through 13 there. That's as far as I wanted to go. But when you think about what I just said, okay, now Protestantism has had no problem saying that the papacy, the Roman Church, whatever, is going to be the beast or is the beast. Those are people that identify as Christians. Protestants have no problem calling other Christians the Antichrist. Okay. You look at other news. What do they call the Pope? The leader of the world's Christians. Guess what? A couple years ago, Kenneth Copeland, Protestant evangelical televangelist, charlatan preacher, said the protest is over. You see Protestant pastor after Protestant pastor buddying up, cozying up with the Catholic Church. You've got a worldwide push for ecumenical alignment, with all the Protestant churches coming back under the umbrella of the Catholic Church. Okay. Now, will the Catholic Church just by itself be the beast? Or will the beast be all of Christendom, unschismed? I don't really know. But how is it? Let's be fair here, right? Okay. You're Joe Protestant out there. You have no problem with the Catholic Church being Antichrist, but yet you can't process that the Antichrist might be evangelical. He might be Protestant. He might be charismatic. Maybe he's a Pentecostal. Maybe he's a Methodist. Maybe he's an Episcopal. Maybe he's whatever. Oh no. Well, you don't have any problem saying it's the Catholic Church. They're Christians. They're not your flavor of Christian, but they're still Christians theologically. Why couldn't they be a Protestant? So and this is where I'm going to bring politics into this. I didn't mean to go into this, but I think I have to. When you look at what's going on around us, okay, you see the left is going berserk. The left is going nuts. Antifa with their antics. You've got the hard left, the AOCs and the Ilhans and all this stuff coming in and just really pushing the Democrats hard left, coming up with all these just blatantly stupid policies. You've got this massive push to force Christians to accept homosexuality and all its different branches, to worship at the rainbow altar. You've got this push to force abortions, to force doctors and nurses to perform abortions against their moral conscience, if they're Christians that don't believe in abortion. You've got this massive push to indoctrinate children into deviant sex or just sex in general when they're just kids in school. It's being shoved down our throats and they're not even trying to hide it. If you know anything about the Hegelian dialectic, you know what it is. You have an ultimate goal that you want to achieve. So how do you get there? You have a problem. Then you have, like I say, a thesis. All right. Then you have an antithesis. Then you have your synthesis. All right. So, if you let's say that I'm right and this beast ends up being a Christian system. Okay. How do you achieve that? How do you get Christianity from where it's at right now on the decline worldwide to this state where it just rules the world and crushes everything? How do you get it to that point? You raise up an opposition, the left, like what we're seeing right now, that is so blatant and so obvious and so in your face. And you let that go on and you ramp it up and you ramp it up and you ramp it up and you ramp it up. And finally, the Christian right can't take it anymore. They snap. They fight back. They win. Now, if there's a supernatural element to that, right? Now what do we have? That's going to establish Christianity as the victor and a major power. You're going to have evangelicals and Catholics possibly coming together, Protestants and whatnot, to team up to fight this, and at least the more conservative elements. And if they're able to stamp that out, all of a sudden they're the only game in town, and then they are now elevated into power. And what are they going to do? What are they going to do? They're going to give glory to their Lord who is risen. Okay? Now, on the surface, that's great. On the surface, that's great. But if you take a good, honest look at the Jesus that is portrayed in Christianity, and you compare him to the Yahshua who was presented in the scriptures, it's two clearly different people. You know, the Yahshua of the scriptures kept his father's commandments, his own commandments, really, because he was just doing the Father's will by giving them to us. He ate clean. He kept the Sabbath, holy days. You know, he kept the commandments, and he told us to follow him. And not once during his ministry did he ever say, "When I die, cut it out." Not once, guys, not once. But the Jesus in Christianity says that I'm dead and now I've risen, and now you can do whatever you want because grace is taken over. You can be like that guy in the country song that goes out Saturday night to the bar, to the honky tonk, gets drunk, goes with his lady friend back to her place, makes sweet love all night, drinking tequila, gets up in the morning, goes down to the church, listens to the preacher preach, sings Amazing Grace, and it's perfectly okay. Because Jesus loves you just as you are. Guys, that Jesus is not the same as the Messiah portrayed in the Bible. I know that is a hard pill to swallow, and most of you, maybe not most of you, because I have no clue who's watching this, but most people are not going to find that, anything they want to hear, and I don't like saying it. I'm not. I take no pleasure. I take no pleasure in any of this. I don't. I don't. Look, it's 11:33 right now. I would love to be in bed. I'm tired, but I'm here doing this because it has to be done. We have to say the hard things sometimes, and we have to ask those hard questions. And I think it's very plausible that we're looking at the beast in the end times being some type of Christian power. And that's why it would make it all the more impactful if the two witnesses were actual disciples of the real Yahshua. Can you imagine? And I mentioned this earlier. If they're out there telling us what Yahshua actually did and said, which we can see in the Bible, from eyewitness testimony, and it's not lining up with what the Christian churches are teaching about Jesus, then all those Christians have a choice to make. Are we going to believe these two guys? And if we believe these two guys, we're obligated to change our lifestyle in accordance with what Yahshua did, with what Messiah did. To follow after him, you have to do what he did, right? Or are they going to cling to the dogma and the traditions and do everything by rote and just keep on keeping on? And I encourage you, look, if you think that this Torah stuff is a bunch of nonsense, keeping the commandments is a bunch of nonsense, I pretend I'm that guy you see in the Facebook meme sitting in the park, little, prove me wrong, whatever. You know, I mean, and when I say prove me wrong, I don't just mean quote from Galatians and call it good, because that ain't good enough. Show me Christ's words. Show me his words where he said he was doing away with the commandments and we don't have to keep them anymore when he died. Show me that. You know? Yahweh said through the prophet Amos that Yahweh does nothing unless he reveals it first to his servants, the prophets. Show me a prophet that said the Messiah is going to come, and when he dies, you don't need to keep the Torah anymore. Show me that. Please. Look, if you can do it, I'm open. I'm open-minded. If you can show me that, I'll accept it. Okay? But I've been looking for that for 15 years plus and have not been able to find it. And so many others have been looking and can't find it. And so the only conclusion is that he never said it. It was never said. And if we're honest with ourselves, we're taking the writings of Paul alone as the basis for that belief. Okay? I mean, really, that's what we're doing. You know, without belaboring the point too much, you read, you know, if you put Paul's letters kind of off to the side, okay, what he wrote to different congregations, okay, these are one-sided conversations. We don't have the other side. We don't have the letters from Corinth or from from Ephesus or whatever. We don't have those. All we have is, like you're standing in a room, you're listening to someone on telephone. It's really easy to get it wrong what they're talking about just based on hearing the one side. But yet that's what we do with Paul. We take one side of the conversation and we assume that we know it all. And we base doctrine on it. So take his letters to the side, go to the book of Acts and look at what he actually did. Look at his actions. And look at his words in the book of Acts. And look at the other apostles and disciples and how they speak to Paul and the conversations that they have. And it makes the case convincingly that Paul himself believed unequivocally, absolutely in keeping the commandments, the Torah, and he did it himself. So, but we're not going to do that. Christianity is not going to do that. Christianity is going to take his letters and they're going to do what Peter warned not to. They're going to twist them out of context as a means to not keep the commandments. I don't know what else to say, guys. But I mean, if we're not looking out for the kind of stuff that I'm, and the Christianity thing, I'm pretty sure that there's something to that. Okay, the other stuff is just pure speculation, and I'm just putting it out there for consideration. There's stuff. Do I want to go into that or not? Yes, I will. I will go into this. Okay. I wasn't going to do this because it takes me outside of that Revelation 10 through 13 window that I was going to focus in on, but I'll take a few minutes. I'm already at 2 hours here almost. Might as well, right? So we read about the two beasts, the one in Revelation 12 and the one in Revelation 13. There's another one in Revelation 17. This is where we talk about Babylon. Now, yeah, I'll have to do this one later, who Babylon is. But the beast, okay? The beast, where is it? He carried me away, this is verse 3, he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, so here's another beast sitting, this beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, now this is where I'm going to connect some dots back into the Old Testament again, okay? This beast, 7 heads, 10 horns, no crowns. Okay, what does a crown represent? Kingship, right?
Yeah.
What does it say down in verse 12? The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. So they haven't yet received a kingdom. Okay. Now, if you're a king without a kingdom, are you really a king? Not really. But once you get your kingdom, yeah, then you're a king. So is it possible that chronologically, this is the first iteration of this beast? 7 heads, 10 horns, no crowns. These 7 horns, these 7 kings are given their kingdoms and therefore are able to function as kings. So then we get to Revelation 13, and now the beast has 7 heads, 10 horns, and 10 crowns. Because each of those horns from Revelation 17 is now a fully functioning king. Okay? Now we know from Daniel chapter 7 that that beast has 10 horns. 1 horn comes up out of those and subdues 3. Okay, so you're going to go from 10 to 11, and then take away 3 is going to leave you with 8. Well, further down in Revelation 17, he talks about, 5 king, 5 were, 1 is to come, and the one who's to come is the 8th and is of 7. So there's 8. Is that a connection? And then you go to Zechariah. This one's a little bit more tenuous, but I'm going to bring it up just in case it's relevant. Zechariah, I want to say 11. Let's see. Yes, Zechariah 11. This is the worthless shepherd. I'll start in verse 7. So I pastured the flock doomed to slaughter, hence the afflicted of the flock. And I took for myself 2 staffs, the one I called favor and the other I called union. So I pastured the flock. Then I annihilated the 3 shepherds in 1 month, for my soul was impatient with them, and their soul also was weary of me. Then I said, I will not pasture you. What is to die, let it die, and what is to be annihilated, let it be annihilated, and let those who are left eat one another's flesh. I took my staff favor and cut it into pieces to break my covenant, which I had made with all the peoples. Now let's think about this. Okay? This is presumably in the first person with Zechariah speaking. And of course, him being a prophet, we're actually looking at Yahweh speaking through him. Okay, but it's in the first person. Does he break his covenants? If Yahshua, the Messiah, or Yahweh the Father, if either one of them broke a covenant, could we put any faith and confidence in them? No. People break covenants. We're the ones that do that, not them. But yet here this person is breaking the covenant that they made with all the peoples. So it was broken on that day, and thus the afflicted of the flock who are watching me realized that it was the word of Yahweh. I said to them, if it's good in your sight, give me my wages, but if not, never mind. So they weighed out 30 shekels of silver as my wages. Does that sound familiar? Then Yahweh said to me, throw it to the potter, that magnificent price at which I was valued by them. So I took the 30 shekels of silver and threw them to the potter in the house of Yahweh. Then I cut in pieces my second staff union to break the brotherhood between Judah and Israel. I'm thinking that this section here, this shepherd, is actually that horn. That horn that comes up from out of the 10, the 11th horn that subdues the 3, and that this is an account of that happening. It could be wrong, but it makes sense to me. Zechariah also ties in, like I said earlier, with Revelation. Zechariah 4 ties in really well with Revelation 11, talking about the lampstands and the olive branches, the olive trees. So just another thing to consider there. I just want to throw that out there before I wrap up. But I think that's all I had tonight in those chapters. There were a few more things that are relevant that I was going to get into, but I don't think I will tonight. But I'll maybe address that later. I'm just going to encourage you, because what does he say at the beginning of the book of Revelation? I'll just go in and read it. Is it at the beginning? Yeah. Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of this prophecy and heed the things which are written in it, for the time is near. Okay. So preterists will say, well, time is near from when he wrote it. Yeah. Okay. Whatever. But blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of this prophecy. So be blessed. Read and hear the words of this prophecy. Read Revelation. Don't be afraid of it. Dig into it. You don't be afraid to connect dots. I mean, most of the prophecy is symbolic. So you mean really? Are we going to be that dogmatic with interpretation of symbolism? Why can't we be more flexible with it? So I mean, if you're reading through this and you have thoughts of what it might mean that don't sound like mainstream teaching, and you think it's a little nutty sounding, hey, you could be right. Share it with me. I'll be glad to hear it. Share it with other people. Let's get together and figure this out. Because I mean, we have a setup for it with the letters to the assemblies at the beginning. Okay, he's got a word for each of these 7 churches, each of these 7 assemblies. Okay, and he's telling specific things to each one. But if you read all these letters, it's clear that the whole group of letters was meant to be read to each church. So in Laodicea, they're reading about Philadelphia, Sardis, Smyrna, I mean, all of them. It's not just a little snippet for Laodicea, a few verses, that's all they get. They're getting this whole block of letters at each one of these assemblies based on the context. And they're also getting not just the letters, but they're getting other stuff from Revelation, because Yahshua describes himself as he goes through those letters in the way he described himself in Revelation chapter 1 before he started in on the letters. So if you're going to know what he's talking about, you need to also have the first chapter of Revelation. So those letters are meant to go with the greater prophetic revelation that was given to John of Patmos. So like we need to think of it in those terms, like it's for everybody, And if you believe that you're going to be raptured out before this happens, like this is just I just have to vent a little bit. People that believe in a preacher of rapture, that study this, they get all crazy, and they write books, and they go on TV, and they go on YouTube, and they go on Facebook, and they have these big things, and they're talking about all this, the Antichrist and the mark of the beast and all this stuff. You're not even going to be here, and your target audience, who is getting into all that stuff by your way of thinking, is going to be raptured with you. So what are we doing? This information is really only useful for people who are going to be here as it all goes down, right? If you're going to check out before this all starts, then why bother? Like it doesn't make any sense. So just a little venting there, a little rabbit trail. But I've gone over 2 hours. I'm going to wrap it up now. Like I said earlier, I hope you have a nice Sabbath. Regardless of if you keep it holy or not, I still hope you have a nice day. I hope that this has been useful, profitable to you somehow. If it has, I hate to shill from my own channel. I feel so weird about this, but like the video, subscribe to the channel, whatever. If anything, it gives me feedback on what's going on. So I mean, I realize that I'm kind of a voice out here in the wilderness, but it's nice to know it's at least going somewhere. anyway, just to kind of help me out in that to kind of gauge. I'm not really interested in building a ministry or building a channel or, I mean, there's no graphics really, I mean, that's why I asked you to get your Bible, because I don't have stuff on screen for you to read with. I mean, I'm not really going to go down that road. This has always been just a means of supplementing what I primarily do in a written form on my Facebook page. That's still my primary way of speaking, I think, is writing. But something like this is just way too involved to get into. So this is the logical way to express it. That's all this is. Okay. Anyway, be blessed in Yahshua's name, and good night.